September 2012 is an often overlooked part of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Coming off the lows from hand loops, unreasonable one-turn kills, or just general unfun gameplay, the September 2012 ban list attempted to alleviate some of these major issues with the game, and I think it did a great job. Now commonly referred to as REDU Format, with well over a dozen viable decks, where duelists can show great skill expression. Edison Format is the peak for Yu-Gi-Oh's 5Ds era. Could REDU be the peak for Sexual? Well, let's find out. Starting off, I play 3 copies of Sabersaurus and 3 copies of Cabosals. We access these vanillas from our deck with the power of Rescue Rabbit, which in turn allows us to make any of our powerful rank 4 plays. Sabersaurus is usually the better one of them, seeing as it has 1900 attack points. But my personal favorite is actually Cabosals. The sneeze from this monster is so fierce that people often mistake it for a hurricane. If you have a favorite between these two dinos, let me know in the comments. Moving on, I play 3 copies of Yuraka Guaiba. Guaiba can be a 1-card Laggia or Dolkka if you have a monster to run over and use its effect. There are also plenty of situations where you just normal summon a Cabosals or a Sabersaurus on your first turn. Or even set the Cabosal, seeing as he has 1500 defense points, so you can wall off cards like Wind-Up Rabbit or Tour Guide from the Underworld. So if you were to just have one of these on the field, you can just summon a Guaiba the following turn, and immediately access any of your rank 4 plays. The Laggia and Dolkka can be so powerful that sometimes they can just seal the game on their own. With Laggia, you can prevent your opponent from using cards like Heavy Storm on your back row, and thus you can keep your floodgates like Macrocosmos or Vanity's Emptiness face up on the field. You can also use this to outright negate a summon of a boss monster like Black-Clustered Soldier Envoy of the beginning. Whilst the Dolkka is oftentimes better against decks like Yugioh or Wind-Up, decks that have a bunch of monster effects you would like to stop, where the Laggia might not be as useful. You could think of it as Laggia being 1 negate, while Dolkka being 2. So if you can resolve both Dolkka activations and actually get a real plus out of them, that is oftentimes better, while the Laggia tends to be safer because you don't lose to cards like a board wipe. Irregardless of which one of these you choose to go for, just having the Guaibas in your deck gives you 9 total vanilla, quote-unquote, monsters you can play. And just summoning 2 of these 9 can allow you to access either Solemn Judgment on legs, or Divine Wrath times 2 on legs. Additionally, the attack points of these is nothing to scoff at. And as you'll see when we get to the spells, I play some cards that make Guaiba's effect even more consistent. And then to access our vanilla dinos, I play 2 copies of Rescue Rabbit. Rescue Rabbit was semi-limited on the September 2012 ban list, whilst only being a semi-limit, thus not reducing the consistency of seeing the rabbit by that much. The fact that you're forced to play 6 vanillas in your deck makes the hit of Rabbit going from 3 to 2, as well as Tour Guide also going to 2, that much worse for the Dino Rabbit deck. And because of this reduction in consistency which can be seen throughout the format, as pretty much every major deck had some consistency hits on the September 2012 ban list. It was mostly the Wind-Up deck which suffered from hits to its longevity, and the fact that the hand loop was no longer profitable enough to go for. And this caused a big shift in the September 2012 format. It severely reduced the amount of non-games that were happening. And because of this shift, I believe deck building just became a whole lot healthier. You no longer had to build your deck expecting to lose your entire hand or just get OTK'd by Insectors. But we'll talk about that more later when we get to the trap cards. Then for the other monsters, I play 2 copies of Tour Guide from the Underworld. Tour Guide from the Underworld can fetch any level 3 fiend directly from your deck or hand to the field. A good companion for her can be Sangan. When Sangan dies, we can search for a Rescue Rabbit from our deck to our hand, leading Tour Guide to be away into Rabbit. However, if we wish to utilize Tour Guide as a 1-card rank 3 engine, we can also do that by just summoning Tour Guide from our deck and overlaying them both into a rank 3, like a Levier for example. A lot of people back in the day used to run Night Assailant as a second target for Tour Guide. But I think in hindsight that was just a mistake. The Night Assailant is quite a bad card on its own, and you can just keep the Sangan in deck if you intend to overlay with the Tour Guide. And for the last monsters in the main deck, I play 2 copies of Spirit Reaper. REDU format is a very normal based focused format. There's very few ways to extend from the hand. And thus the various summon stoppers that exist, be it Torrential, Bottomless, Warning or Judgment, a lot of the time when you summon monsters, you just get hit by summon stops and you just fall behind and you lose from there. And a good way to play around all of these summon stops, should your deck be normal summon reliant, is to just set a monster. You can set Spirit Reaper into most fields and it will be sure to survive. Most ways to deal with a Spirit Reaper aside from using a card like Forbidden Lands on it and outright killing it, is to enter the extra deck and target it with a card like Bourrée or Photon Papilloperative. But should they commit to a card that can target the Spirit Reaper and thereby killing it or remove it with another card, you have your own traps to prevent that. Additionally, Reaper is very good with your own summon stoppers. If you can stop them from summoning, you can just normal summon Spirit Reaper and attack directly, and use his effect to discard a card from their hand. That's it for the monsters, no hand traps in the main deck. And for the spells, I play 3 copies of Forbidden Lands. Lands can not only protect your boss monsters from their removal, you can also use lands in the damage step on your opponent's monsters when you attack with a Guaiba. And against opposing Spirit Reapers, you can also target it with lands to make it unaffected by spells and traps, thus killing the Reaper because it was targeted by a card effect. Additionally, lands being a reverse rush recklessy. By reducing their monster by 800 attack, you can allow yourself to swing over it, which comes up quite a lot in the grindy scenarios with this deck. 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. REDU Format has Heavy Storm and 3 copies of MST. The Dino Rabbit deck can be quite slow, so a lot of the time you actually can grind through your opponent's back rows and you don't really need to remove them before you make your play. Additionally, with the 3 copies of Forbidden Lands that I play, I have a lot of ways to already answer their back row. So the 2 copies of MST in here are mainly when you have a read on a face down Solemn Warning. They only have 1 back row, or when you want to remove a card like Wind Up Factory. And for those that play Edison format, you know just how good a continuous monster searcher can be. Then I play REDU's equivalent of the Trinity, being Heavy Storm, Dark Hole, and Monster Reborn. Arguably not as good as the GOAT format Trinity, these cards are still very powerful in this format. So whilst the Heavy and Dark Hole are at times used just as a 1-for-1, the fact that they can be heavy blowouts and force your opponent to play differently is why I think this format is very good. People tend to not set their entire hand on turn 1 in fear of a Heavy Storm, and I think that's a good thing. And the same is true for Dark Hole, you really don't want to extend your entire hand onto the field just to lose to a board wipe. Monster Reborn is probably the strongest singular card of this Trinity, but definitely the least game warping. But should your opponent negate the summon of your Risky Rabbit, oh does it feel so good to bring it back with Reborn and use its effect. And the last spell I have is 1 copy of Book of Moon. As REDU format has a heavy extra deck based era, especially with Exceeds, Book of Moon gets a whole lot better. Additionally, you can book your opponent's monster face down to allow Guaiba to run it over, or you can book your own Spirit Reaper to save it from a targeting card. So Book is just an overall great card in this format. Then for the trap cards, I play 3 copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device. With the September 2012 ban list, the game got a lot more slow paced, and thus Compulse being, albeit a neg 1, a very good tempo card. What Compulse allows you to do is to bait out the negate of cards like Evolsaur Laggia, bounce back cards like Dolkka, or remove any of the exceeds made by Torgad at a 1-for-1, something like a Senmains or a Leviathan. What else Compulse allows you to do is to bounce back Shockmaster. Shockmaster is a powerful rank 3 that can shut out any of the 3 types in Yu-Gi-Oh, be it monster, spell or trap. Now this might sound like a very overbearing floodgate and a reason why you should not play REDU format. However, I think Shockmaster is actually healthy for the game. Shockmaster kind of forces the game to slow down because windups can go into it, so you can't play a deck that's just all out an aggressive deck. You need some counterplay to Shockmaster, be it in the form of Compulse, or the healthy floodgate in this format being Maxi. There's also other cards like Rivalry of Warlords, the Ghosted Match, or Needle Stealing, all of which severely punish the windup player if they go for the Shockmaster turn 1. My prediction will be that windup players will know about these cards post-side, and they'll just go for a midfield consisting of cards like Zen Mighty or Windup Senmains with some Windup Rabbits coming back. No one in their right mind will go for the all-in combo play and they just get hit by a floodgate like Rivalry or Ghostin or a board breaker like Needle Stealing, where a lot of the time they just lose the game outright. They'll just go for a more conservative play and play for follow-up. But as I mentioned, it does shut out some of those combo decks, like Chaos Dragons. But I will talk more about that once we get to the wind-up deck profile. Then for the 2 of traps, there's a lot of them. 2 copies of Macrocosmos. Macrocosmos' playability is very much based on the current metagame. Obviously the card pool for REDU will not change, but the metagame will. People will play other decks than they do now in a year from now. But for right now I'm seeing a lot of Chaos Dragons, which is quite a tough matchup for the Rabbit deck, thus I decided to main deck 2 copies of Macrocosmos. Macro is also good into windups and insectors and a plethora of other decks in this format. It is close to an auto win if you flip it against Dark Worlds. Macro does not hurt this deck at all. The only card that you really care about is Monster Reborn, but on the upside, your Tour Guides and Rescue Rabbit get so much better. Macrocosmos shuts off Effect Veiler and Maxi, so your cards will definitely resolve at least against those hand traps. And Tour Guide is a 1-card Levier, so Levier gets a whole lot better once every card gets banished. Then I play 2 copies of Dimensional Prison. In REDU format, Mirror Force is at 2, and I actually elected to play 0 copies of Mirror Force in this deck. Partially because of Starlight Road. I don't want to have too many cards that force me to remove 2 monsters at the same time, thus playing into Road. Additionally, the Prison can be used against cards like Sangan, and a lot of the time your opponent is just summoning 1 monster anyway. And the biggest reason why I'm playing Prison over Mirror Force is because of wind-up Zenmains. Torget is a 1-card Zenmains, and this card can be quite troublesome to out. And then for the aforementioned Summon Stoppers, I play 2 copies of Bottomless Trap Hole, 2 copies of Torrential Tribute, and 2 copies of Solemn Warning. All of these cards are semi-limited in REDU format. While there certainly are issues with Summon Stoppers, be it they're either not very good going second into established fields, or that some of them can sometimes feel like a waste to activate, they're very good at stopping your opponents from doing the unfair things. Specifically TT and Bottomless, which windups can both play around pretty well, the Warning is very good because it negates their summons. And against any of the low to the ground decks like the Mirror Match or Yugioh for example, these cards can be very good. And for the last traps, I play 1 copy of Solemn Judgment. Unlike Edison format, where Solemn Judgment can often be a hit or miss type of card, in this format Judgment is very much necessary. The power in REDU is just so much higher than in Edison format, so you kinda need a card to actually answer everything your opponent can do. And with your opponent having access to all of these Solemn cards, you want a card to negate their negate card. And then 1 copy of Starlight Road. I think 2 copies of Road is too much in the Rabbit deck. You have 2 copies of Rabbit, Solemn Judgment, and Road, which all can make a negate for Heavy Storm. And games that you do lose is often when you draw multiple Roads, or you have this card and it's just dead. So I think the 1 Road in the main deck is plenty. And then for the extra deck, I have 1 copy of Temp Tempo. Temp Tempo can remove Exceed materials, usually from opposing Zenmains, and then he boosts your Jins, be it either Temp Tempo or Maestroke. 1 Acid Golem, this is a very good card because it's 3000 attack. Whilst we do not play Skill Drain, and neither should people side Skill Drain against this deck, just being able to go for a 3000 attack body can be quite good. Then we play our own copy of Wind Up Zenmains, being a very powerful rank 3 play to stall out the game. And we can summon this and crash into our opponent's monsters to remove anything in the end phase. 1 copy of Levier the Sea Dragon. Rabbit banishes himself to summon 2 vanillas from the deck, and then we can make Levier with Tour Guide to bring it back and do it all over again. 1 copy of number 17 Leviathan Dragon. This card can go up to 2500 attack by just detaching a material. 1 copy of Gemnite Pearl. With Rabbit we can make this with Sabersaurus under Gozen, and 26 can come up at times. 1 copy of Merogeist. Merogeist can be made with Cowboy Souls if our opponent has Gozen match face up, and we can also make Merogeist to attack over a Sangan and shuffle it into the deck. 1 copy of Steel Swarm Roach, being a very good card against Chaos Dragons and Heretics. 2 copies of Evolsaur Dolkka. We've talked about this guy before, but he's a very powerful rank 4, being able to negate monster effects activated by our opponent. 1 copy of Maestroke the Symphony Jin. Maestroke is an Ignition Book of Moon and can protect himself and other Jins by detaching a material. 1 copy of Photon Papilloperative. This card can out Spirit Reaper because it targets a defense position monster on the field and puts it into attack. You can also do some nifty plays by reducing the attack of your own monsters to attack under Messenger of Peace. 2 copies of Laggia. Evolsaur Laggia is a walking Solemn Judgment. When we make Laggia, we're usually in a winning position because we can just negate whatever we lose to, and use our trap cards to remove our opponent's monsters. And the last extra card is actually 1 Synchro, Stardust Dragon. Since I play no tuners, I cannot make this card on my own unless I use Monster Reborn to take one of my opponent's tuners. But we can summon Stardust Dragon with Starlight Road. Do keep in mind that if you summon Stardust Dragon with Road and you negate a card, you cannot bring this card back in the end phase, as extra deck monsters have to be properly summoned before they can be brought back. And then for the side deck, I have 2 copies of Maxi. As we talked about before with the wind-up deck, Maxi is actually not a must to play in this format. While it is a good card, a skilled opponent would usually not go for the entire all-in Shockmaster combo, because if they do, they might just lose to a Needle Ceiling. So if they go for more conservative plays and just play for follow-up, Maxi is not that needed. Maxi is also very bad in the hands where they have Rabbit and Factory, and they just play for the long game. Their Maxi can buy you a turn, but you're not really doing much in your turn against their Summon Stopper anyway, so you would rather have this card be something else. But you don't know how your opponent will play, so having Maxi in your side deck is at least nice against those combo decks where your opponent want to go all in. And should that be the case that wind-up players always go for every explosive play that they can do, and you don't draw Needle Ceiling, then maybe you should play 3 copies of Maxi. Again, REDU Format is very much underexplored, and the Rabbit deck itself does not control the metagame, it plays against the metagame. So most of the cards in the Rabbit main and side deck are to counteract the metagame, so it just depends on what the metagame is, and that's how you should build your deck. But I think 2 copies of Maxi is fine, you have plenty of counterplay against the Shock Lock combo anyway. Then I started 2 copies of Raikou. I absolutely refuse to keep MST against Chaos Dragons, so I want a card that I can use to pop the Royal Decree, but isn't just a complete blank should they not have the Decree. So Raikou is a very good card at doing that. Along with the 2 copies of Raikou, you technically also play 2 copies of Rabbit, which can make Laggia to negate the Decree, and 2 copies of Torguide as well as Reaper, so you can at least make Senmain some of the time to just pop it. And I think that, coupled with a Solemn Judgment preemptively set, is enough to counteract Royal Decree. Then I have 2 copies of Thunder King Ryo. Thunder King Ryo is very good against some decks, and when you go first, you don't really play into the Summon Stopper issue that much, so you can cut Reaper for this. And a pro with Thunder King against the wind-up deck, for example, is that this shuts off their special summons by negating it, and also their wind-up Factory, and if they play it, the Sangan as well. The 3rd copy of MST, 2 copies of Nobleman of Crossout. Knock is for Yugioh. Being able to deal with a Yugioh armor can be quite troublesome at times, and you can just knock it away. 2 copies of Soul Taker. Soul Taker says destroy a face-up monster on the field, and then your opponent gains 1000 life points. So this card makes cards like Light Pulsar or Elemental Hero The Shining miss timing. It is also good against the mirror match because you can just deal with a monster, which is often something this deck can struggle with. 2 copies of Needle Ceiling. The Rabbit deck cannot support Rivalry nor Gosen, so Needle Ceiling is the best card we can play against the wind-up. Their turn 1 combo usually passes on 3 monsters, so we can just set a monster and then activate Needle Ceiling in the draw phase, before they get a chance to use Shockmaster. And the last 2 sided cards are 2 copies of Vanity's Emptiness. Emptiness is quite a good card for when we go first. Being able to have a floodgate that can stop special summoning is very good. If you enjoy my content, make sure to also subscribe to my second channel, linked in the description box down below. There I'll be posting more personalized and exclusive content.